So you've finally booked that dream vacation to Italy that you've always wanted to take. And now you may be asking yourself, should I learn some of the language before I go on my trip? Maybe you've gone out on social media and asked this question, and maybe you've also received a lot of different answers. And because of this, some of this information can be quite confusing because not everybody likes to travel the same way. So inside of this video today, that's what we're going to be talking about. We're going to be going over some of the responses that you might receive if you were to ask this question. And I'm also going to be giving you guys some of my own personal experiences from my trips so that you can make the best decision on whether or not you should learn a foreign language before going on your trip. So that's what this video is going to be about. So anyways, let's go. Now, if you were to go out onto social media to any of these travel groups and you were to ask this question, you're probably going to receive one of three different answers. The first of these answers is no, you absolutely do not need to learn any of the language in order to have a fantastic trip, and you will be able to get by just fine without it. The second answer you're going to receive is that it is absolutely mandatory that you learn a foreign language. And then the third answer is going to be somewhere in between, people who are telling you that you really just need to learn enough to get by. So let's start by talking about the first one, which are the people who are going to tell you, no, you absolutely do not need to learn a language. And this is actually true. With advances in technologies such as the translators that you can get for your phone, a lot of times you can do just about everything that you need to do on your trip. You can use it to communicate back and forth with locals. You can use it to read menus or signs. So with a lot of these technologies now, it's made it a lot easier for people to be able to travel to places where maybe they do not understand the language and still get by. But obviously, using translators also comes with a huge downside. Whenever you want to use it to communicate with somebody, you're going to have to record your voice in, hoping that, your speak to text works the way it's supposed to. You don't say something by accident. You're going to have to play it for them. They're going to have to listen to it. You're going to have to stop, hit record, let them talk back to you. If you're having a long conversation with somebody, this can get very monotonous after a while. So there is a big downside to using translators all the time. However, most of the conversations that you're going to have are probably not going to be long drawn out ones. They're going to be you asking how much something is or where something's at. So in a lot of cases, you're going to find that translators will work just fine for what you need. The other thing I want to point out, though, about this answer is that sometimes you'll get a second part to it, and that's that everybody over there speaks English. Now, this is actually entirely false. Now, when you are in some of the touristy areas, obviously you're going to hear English a lot more. English is taught as a second language in places like Italy. And also, if you work in the tourist industry, you are required to take English. However, just because you're in a touristy area does not mean that everybody speaks English. You're going to find a lot of mom and pop shops that have been there forever, and the owners won't speak any English at all. So this is just something to be aware of. Whenever you hear this answer, if someone tells you that it's because everybody speaks English, just know that this is not correct. The second answer that you might hear whenever you're asking this question is, of course, that it's mandatory that you have to learn a certain amount of the language before you go on your trip. And this is actually false. Keep in mind that anytime you add the word mandatory to anything, it does add a lot of unnecessary stress. Not everybody has the same time and resources to dedicate to something like learning a new language. Maybe they have a very busy job or they have kids, other responsibilities. So just keep that in mind. If you are going on a trip to another country where they speak another language, don't feel obligated to have to learn any certain amount of the language. The third and final answer that you're probably going to hear when asking this question is that you should at least learn some basic key phrases and words just to kind of get by. And this is actually true. Now, again, as I said before, you should not feel pressured into this. Only really take the time to learn this if you have the resources to dedicate to it. But by learning some basic key things, it's not only going to help you to communicate better with the locals, but it's also going to add some extra enhancements to the trip overall. One example that I'll give you guys was while we were staying in Florence. One thing to know about the hotels in Italy is that some of them are in very old buildings and the keys are very hard to replace. So as you leave each day, you have to drop your key off at the front desk. Then when you come back in the afternoon, you can pick it back up. Now, normally I would walk by the lady at the front and I would say room 408, please. She would hand me my key. And then of course she would kind of smile at me. Then we would go on about our way. But one day I decided that I wanted to try to say my room number in Italian. I walked up to her. I said, do you mind if I try this in Italian? And all of a sudden she got very interested. She kind of perked up a little bit. So I walked up to her and I said, 408. Her immediate response was, bravo, bravo. And she got so excited that I actually said my room key number in Italian. And from that moment on, the whole experience with this person changed. Every time we would walk in or out of the building, she was always very attentive to us. She always wanted to talk to us a lot more. So as you can see, by using some little phrases here and there, it can sort of change the experience up a little bit. So at this point, you might be asking, how much Italian should I actually learn? And a lot of this is going to be based on multiple different things. For example, do you plan on taking a train at some point? If so, you might want to learn the word train. Are you going to be taking taxis? Obviously, you're going to be going to the airport. There's going to be certain sites that you're going to want to see, maybe like the piazzas or something like that. It might be important to know those names. Also, some of the names of the churches. You know, a lot of it is going to depend on what you were doing inside of your trip and where you were going. One thing I can tell you is that make sure that you know things like the name of your hotel. If you have to give that to a cab driver, obviously that's going to be very important. But a lot of the basic sites, a lot of the ones that people go to the most, they're going to know them in English, such as the Colosseum or the Roman Forum or something like that. But again, use your own discretion. You know, how much Italian you learn is really going to be up to you based on where you are going in your trip and what exactly you were doing. Another really cool thing that I personally learned on my first trip to Italy was a lot of the foods. Now, obviously, you know what you like, you know what you don't like. That's another important thing. You know, obviously, if you don't eat fish, then stay away from pesce. But by knowing a lot of the foods that I wanted ahead of time, it was easy for me to walk into a restaurant, look at a menu, and know exactly what I wanted without ever having to use a translator. There are also other things when it comes to menus that you'll want to know as well, like con, di, al, and alla. These are going to be things that you're going to see on every menu. And once you know the difference between them, it's really going to help you to be able to read the menu and know exactly what you're getting. So again, a lot of this is sort of personal preference. You don't have to learn this, but one big recommendation that I always give to people, especially if you've made reservations somewhere, is to go and download their menu and take a look at it and sort of get an idea of what foods you want to eat before you ever go and what they are in Italian. There are also a lot of basic interactive words and phrases that you may want to familiarize yourself with as well. Things like buongiorno, buonasera, salve, per favore, and grazie. You will end up using and hearing these phrases and words quite often if you are traveling to Italy, and I will be doing a full video on basic phrases in the future if you are interested in learning these. Now, some of you guys might be saying, well, you know, I'm a little embarrassed to go to another country and speak a language that I really don't know. And that's perfectly fine. You know, if you're not comfortable, then you don't have to. However, just know that Italians are just as embarrassed of speaking English as you are of Italian. Because you are putting forth the effort to actually learn the language and speak it, they will go out of their way to help you. To give you guys an example, we were at breakfast one morning and I wanted to order 2 cappuccinos for me and my wife. I told the waitress, due cappuccino, and she kind of looked at me weird for a moment. And she said, so you want a cappuccino with a double shot? And I said, no, I wanted one for both me and my wife. She goes, okay. Due cappuccini. And she did so with a huge smile on her face. It actually thrilled her to be able to help me to learn where my mistakes were. So again, don't feel embarrassed to speak the language. Most people in most other countries are very appreciative that you're actually taking the effort, and they will do whatever they can to help you out to make sure that you understand the language better. The final point I want to make when it comes to learning a foreign language is that sometimes if you're going to learn certain things such as questions and you're going to be asking them in a language, you need to make sure that you are ready to understand the response. So for example, if I'm in Italy and I want to ask somebody how they are, I say come stai, I better know what the responses to that might be. You know, I could hear a multitude of different things such as bene or molto bene. If I go into a store and I ask somebody how much something costs, I better at least know my numbers up to 100. So this is just something to kind of think about a little bit. If you are going to reach a certain level in trying to learn a language where you're going to be asking a lot of questions, just be prepared because the answer that you get back may also be in that same language. So this is going to conclude my video talking about whether or not you should learn a foreign language or not whenever you are traveling. Now, whichever way you choose is really up to you. It's going to be based on how much time and effort you're willing to give to it. No two people are alike, and everybody has different things that they want to get out of their vacation. So obviously there are a lot of different ways of looking at things, and that's why you normally get multiple different answers whenever you ask these questions. Obviously, if you want to learn the language, by all means do so. If you do not have the time, then don't feel obligated. But again, by simply using some basic phrases and things like that, it can really end up enhancing your overall trip. So just keep that in mind. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching this. I really appreciate it. If you would, please leave likes or comments down below and make sure and hit that subscribe button because it really helps this channel out a lot. Anyways, thank you guys so much, and we'll see you in the next video.